Well, hello everybody. I'm Fred, the Orca Man, and I'm here today with Dr. Stephen Ness. Stephen, I want to thank you for coming on. He is a, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to let Stephen introduce himself, so I'll let you take it away.
Hi, my name is Stephen Ness, and I did my PhD studying orcas. Basically, I was one of the people who helped create the Orchive. That's a huge archive of orca recordings and a couple websites dedicated to analyzing the orca sounds with machine learning. And did my PhD studying the orcas, but also studying machine learning and interactive collaborative interfaces to study orca sounds.
That's fantastic.
And I'm a software engineer. And,
Wonderful. No, it's one of the most amazing things that I think I've found is just the amount of people that can enter into this field of orcas. Everybody thinks it's research or otherwise, but even something as like intricate as machine learning is going to be extremely interesting. So that's definitely huge. One of the biggest questions that I had for you is when you started and got this project underway, when did the name the Orchive come about?
the Orchive actually came about even before I started. And the
Really?
way that I heard about it was I was up in Powell River
Hmm.
working, trying to do a startup. So I was doing a bunch of web startups and
Okay.
trying different kinds of startup ideas. I was involved with people in the United States, some of the things on my own. And then
Hmm.
on CBC radio in the morning, Gregor Craigie was interviewing Paul Spong,
Okay.
and he was talking about the Orchive, and they had this huge archive of orca sounds, and they were trying to analyze them with machine learning. Actually, it might even have been George Xanatakis, who was my supervisor eventually.
Hmm.
And I think he was talking about the Orchive and that they were going to use machine learning to study it. And they were digitizing all these tapes. And I contacted him and said, "Hey, I know how to do stuff on the web, and I can I want to develop your website for free." And he was like, "Okay, sounds great." And so then I started talking to George
Hmm.
gradually and built up an initial small website. And
Yeah.
then in George's lab, they're making music with robots and computers. And
Hmm.
I'm a musician as well. So then it just looked cooler and cooler. So I decided to start doing my master's. I went back to school. I had
Okay.
been working for many years in biochemistry, and
Okay.
then decided to go back to university and go to computer science.
That's
And
neat.
then started in George's lab and mostly did the Orchive, kind of like half and half did Orchive, and then half was like analyzing music and making music with computers and machine learning. So they had already George had come up with the name, the Orchive. He's
Yeah.
really good at naming things. And that was like, they already had that name, and they were kind of like halfway done digitizing the audio cassettes. So
Okay.
I helped digitize the audio cassettes. They had them on like those old like cassette tapes. Like, you remember like the old
Oh yeah.
cassette, all in beer flats, like where you'd have beer cans and they'd have stacks and stacks. So I'd like a big part of my first few years in George's lab was just putting tapes in, hitting play, turning starting the little, we had like a little Mac Mini, and
Yeah.
I just start up the digitizing, and then so created that, and then also created the first version of the website, the archive.
That's fantastic. I didn't realize that that was what brought you into, I'll call it post-secondary education or not. Yeah. Post-secondary education. No, that's post-grad education or no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you started your master's after learning about this, which is pretty neat, I gotta say.
Well, thanks. I'd been working in biochemistry in labs and stuff, like doing computers biochemistry, but
Okay.
it didn't really fit what I wanted to do. But then when I found out about this, I thought, okay, it's time to go back to school after like I think 15 years or so being out of school. So it was really cool to go back to school and then come at it from like a different point of view. It was a lot more fun to do it.
Yeah, that's got to be a decent, like a solid time too. At the point, like you're saying, you're working on orcas and computer created music. That's pretty neat to say the
It was
least. It's
pretty
a pretty
neat.
good
It's
way to
pretty
spend
cool.
a couple of years. Also,
Yeah.
too, though, if you were recording all of the cassette tapes, or if you were digitizing them, then you had to have heard just about as many Orca calls as any researcher out there, if I had to guess.
I've had to do a lot of listening, and like I did a lot of annotating. The early versions of the Orchive website, you'd have like a interactive annotator.
Hmm.
So as part of my PhD, I listened to a lot of Orca calls and annotated a lot of Orca calls. So Paul and Helen, I think Helena probably has listened to probably the most.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of researchers up at Orca Lab who have, but yeah, I've listened to a lot of Orca calls.
That's insane. Did you also, because this is one thing I was interested when I was looking through the website, is there an implementation for them to just record everything digitally to it now?
I think they're doing partially that. They're still really um, uh, concerned about loss of data. So
Hmm.
they're still recording it, I think, onto analog cassettes. And then they started recording it onto digital audio tapes. And I think
Gotcha.
recently now they're also starting to record it right to computer as well.
That's insane. That's also too. I gotta laugh when I hear that. If only because when I think of like the origins of Orca research, it's something as simple like cassettes in the water. I know when Moby Doll was in Burrard Inlet, like there are videos of like people with, I don't know if it was record players or it wasn't cassette tapes even, but they were properly recording it onto, I'll call it like hardware for it. So even just hearing how continuous that's been over time, it's neat to see that it's keeping forward. I also wonder like where they buy cassette tapes right now, of all
Right.
things.
Yep, totally. They have some of the early recordings are on those old reel to reel,
Hmm.
and they haven't digitized those. So we have like recordings in the Orca going back to 1985, but they have recordings going back even before that, to like 1982 and before that. But they're starting to degrade, so they want to be really careful. They'll have one chance to digitize those old tapes.
Oh, that's crazy. And I can only imagine too, because right, you'll end up putting it in if it goes into a cassette tape in 1980, let's say 1986. If you don't touch that for 25 years, you gotta be as careful as possible. It just it's not getting the use and otherwise. I can see how that would work then. That's more than fair. So you started with your master's when you started this project and then developed it into a PhD?
Yep, just did the master's really quick, and then there was lots more to do. So then I just kept going, same lab, and just the PhD doing the same stuff. In the PhD, I focused more on the archive though. Like I
Okay.
did some stuff with the music, but then just like really focused on the archive.
Gotcha, gotcha. And when you were, so you said, did you know George Xanatakis before you went into the masters, or did you like, was he the person you heard on the radio?
Yeah, he was the guy I heard on the radio, and then
Okay.
and then contacted him, just emailed him, and then we started talking. And then I saw him on TV with his students doing something with music and robots, and I was like, okay, this is like definitely. I'm a drummer, so it's like definitely where I belong.
Oh, that's awesome. How long have you been drumming for?
Since I was like 12 or so
Nice.
long time. My
That's
grandpa was
fantastic.
a band leader, and dad was a musician as well, so I've been like on music for my whole life.
That's awesome. Now, one of my best friends here is a drummer. He also picked up the banjo recently, though, which I always found funny.
Oh, there you
I've gone
go.
over there, he's finger
Thanks.
picking. Ah, it's just a good time. For all right, so this is a question. Like for the computer created music, what was the goal behind it ideally? I'm just interested at this.
To try to get the computers to listen to what the humans are doing and play along with the humans. So you have like some
Okay.
kind of collaboration. So like I had like some robots that you could like use machine learning, and then the computer could like listen to what you're playing and then kind of play along with you. And that's been developed a lot. So I went down, did half my PhD kind of working with Google, and they have the magenta system, and that's like
Okay.
using AI to kind of like do that, like so kind of like playing duets with the computer. So it's like how to like use the computers and humans to together to like make music, make cooler music.
That's fantastic. I couldn't even imagine that that was possible. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. Like all I can
Yeah,
see is
yeah.
something like a Star Wars where you have robots playing the drums in the background, or like you're on the drums and they're catching the beat over. That's a riot.
Yep, yep. That was our lab. It's like super fun. It's hard to make money out of it, but it's really
Fair.
fun. It's really cool.
Oh, so there'll be some special concerts at some point. I could see that
We had
happening.
some Yeah, we had some great concerts. Hardly anyone would come to them, but
Oh.
and the music was pretty out there, but there's some YouTube videos and some cool concerts. Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to look at them. I'll even try to link them down in the description wherever this is going to be, because I think that would be
Oh,
something that
sure.
me definitely, but I guarantee other people would want to check out. It's phenomenal. All right, so back to the archive real quick. So if you're spending an exuberant amount of time sifting through and annotating all of the calls, do you have any calls that you know particularly of any group of whales or matriline or something to that effect?
Yeah, for sure. Like, so we're studying a lot of the just basically the northern resident killer whales. So
Hmm.
not the transients, not the offshores. And of those, like the A clan, we're knowing like a lot of those calls. So like the N4 call, like woo, like you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
N47, woo, you hear that a lot as well. N3, you hear that a lot. That's like when they're sleeping. So they have that call a lot. So over
Cool.
time you start recognizing some of the calls.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's one of the things I can remember the first time that I went down to San Juan Island. Actually, I got put onto the hydrophone system. Like, hey, like if you go on, you can listen in. And I can remember just listening for a squeal. And I can only imagine, like at the beginning when everybody was starting, it's like you're listening for something, and then you're like, wait, they all make sense. There was also the visualizations. I'm not going to be able to get the word correct. It's not stenograph.
Spectrograms.
Spectrograms. So for the spectrograms, could you explain to me and the audience in general what a spectrogram is?
For sure. So that's really important for us humans because our brains are tuned to look at things, and our visual system is one of our dominant systems. Like definitely we have a good auditory system, but our
Hmm.
visual system is really primary. For orcas, probably it's the auditory system. So we need to have like some way to cheat as a human to like look at those things, the sounds that the orcas are making. And a spectrogram, it's like complicated math, but it's really simple in practice. Instead of just like one axis of time, and then you see like the waveforms,
Hmm.
it then tries to figure out, or it uses an algorithm to figure out the frequencies, and it plots the frequencies on the vertical axis and the time on the horizontal. So you see like a picture what the sounds like when I say
Yeah.
like N4 is like woo, it goes woo, and you can really just see it like right
Yeah.
directly on the spectrogram. And it's one of the old original ways to analyze sounds, and people looking at speech use them a lot. Like people who analyze speech look at spectrograms. So it's just
Neat.
a way to take things that's just in one dimension and then make another dimension, so it makes a picture that the humans can look at more
Yeah.
easily. And it's really critical for orca communication.
Oh no, without a doubt. And like you said, it's cheating in a way. It's it's a way for us to like, oh, okay, I know what that looks like at the very least. It's reading subtitles at the end of the day, something to that effect.
Yep, totally, exactly. To try to get us to somewhere close to what the orca brain is capable of processing.
Oh yeah, well, and that's a whole other that's a whole other area is what I'll call it, if only because when I think about, let's say, the orcas transmitting sounds to one another, like as much as we can see or or see hear what they're sending, what how they receive it, I think is a whole nother thing that I'm not sure if anybody understands or is able to conceptualize yet. But that's a whole other piece of science, if I had to guess.
Totally. And I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but the spectrogram is just one way to look at the sounds, and maybe isn't the most, like it was easy with math, like it was something that came up from engineering, but
Hmm.
isn't exactly like how our brains are processing it. So when I was down at Google, then we're using these stabilized audio intervalgrams, and that was like more based on how our neurons actually process the sounds. And if you look at the calls with that, you actually get different kinds of pictures and you're seeing more information. So there's really a lot more that people will be able to do in the future with like turning the orca sounds to different kinds of pictures and 2D and 3D pictures. So
It's
we're just like at
fantastic.
the beginning with analyzing the orca sounds.
Well, that just makes the archive that much more important in my head then, right? Because if it's all digitized, right? This is exactly why you created it, as far as I read. It was like for the preservation of the audio clips, number one, but then two, they're open for anybody to utilize. So if any computer scientists are out there that's looking to do more visualization, there's a place for it.
Yep, totally. There's more. I'm being contacted more and more actually by computer scientists who are using machine learning and stuff and different ways to analyze the orca sounds. And so, yeah, there's really like this is such an interesting archive because it goes back so far in
Oh
time
yeah.
and it contains calls of orcas who are no longer alive. So you can like actually go back in time and look at how the language might have changed. It's really a big project and we're just like at the very beginning of studying it though.
No, it's fantastic, and I do have to commend you for being a part, like being such an integral part of it as well. Because when I'm looking at like all these, it's like a lot of them are history books, and whenever I start talking to people about orcas, the one thing that I'll continue to say is that the field of just orca research in general, number one, is young. So it's been around for what 50 years, 60 years maybe, like inching on 60. But something like computer science as well, like our capabilities are so small right now compared to anything that is going to come, and everything's going that much faster. It's like there's still a lot of room for new ideas, which I feel like a lot of people aren't fully conceptualizing.
Totally, totally. And for young, smart people, there's just so much out there with in the archive with the data and just like the hard work that Paul and Helen have done. Like I like digitize these and I made like a website, but they're the ones that are like every day
Oh yeah.
recording, watching for the whales, listening to the whales every day, and like 6 a.m., 5 a.m., turning on the recording. And in January, when it's cold, you can like listen to some of the early recordings and just like how difficult it was. So just like how much work they did. We're just like benefiting from all that dedication.
No, without a doubt. Do you so me sitting here in Vancouver right now, I couldn't even imagine what waking up at 5 a.m. on the island going out for that morning is. But you were at OrcaLab for a little while when you were doing a lot of this work, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I visited just like 2 or 3 times, hardly just
Gotcha.
like for like a couple weeks here and there. So I saw a little bit of things that were happening in real time. It's really exciting to see them. Like they have during the summers when I went, they have a lot of research assistants and
Yeah.
they're 24/7. It's a great location because it's like their restaurant and also the spa. So like that's where there's the
Oh.
Broughton Archipelago where there's all the salmon that come out
Oh
during the
yeah.
summer. So they go through that same route every day. It's like really where there's lots of fish. So they get regular orca visits every day basically, so it's really cool. And then there's the rubbing beach right by there, which is their spa where they rub on the
Hmm.
pebbles, and they have hydrophones there so you can actually hear them rubbing on the rubbing beaches. And then lately they have through explore.org or something, they have like
I believe so.
webcams as well, so you can watch them underwater and above the water. And so it's really cool.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things I think anybody's like seen to date. Before I can only imagine what. Oh, there's the 60 years ago when nobody saw anything other than a fin, and now if you're in the middle of Indiana, you can you can have a bird's eye view under or a fish eye view into the real life of orcas, which is insane as well. That's
Yeah,
genuinely impressive everything that they set up,
yeah, totally.
and
So
also
it's such
too.
dedication.
Oh yeah. Well, you were talking earlier when you just said the restaurant and spa is right around there. I really thought you meant Orca Lab for a second. I'm like, there's a restaurant and spa there too. They have everything, orcas and massages. Wow, that's really just the whole treat.
No, just for the whales.
Oh yeah.
For the people, they have like their main lab, and then they put the scientists in a really nice cabin, but most of the researchers are just like tenting out in the forest there. But it's just beautiful on Hansen Island. It's just like pristine forest. It's amazing out there.
Yeah, this is one of the most interesting, like the Pacific Northwest is one of the most interesting places I've ever been to, if only because there's such a vast amount of not necessarily untouched, but undeveloped land. Like even I'm in Vancouver right now, like I've said, but if I look to North Vancouver, the thing that I've always found interesting is that there's a line. There's like, okay, we're gonna end development here, and then if you go north of that, there's mountains, and then you hit the North Pole as far as far as
Yeah.
I can check.
Yes. Yeah. There you
And then if
go.
you go up
Yeah.
the islands as well, it's like that the entire route up. That basically like there's small little communities here and there, but otherwise it's still very heavily underdeveloped. It's just it's a magical place.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. Totally.
We gotta love it. You gotta love it. So how long were you? So you did the masters for you said a short amount of time, just about a year. How long was your PhD then?
That PhD was like 6 years. So started in 2007 and finished in 2013. Started the master's in 2007 and finished the PhD in 2013. So
Nice. No, it's a good amount of time definitely for that then. I would say I like even just now with finishing my 4 years of undergrad, I'm like, okay, like maybe leaving some time off of schools. And then the 15 years
yeah.
in between for that, that must have been what were you doing during that time?
Doing research in biochemistry labs, so using computers and doing protein crystallography. So
Okay.
there's like the protein folding problem that was just like solved by DeepMind or whatever. So that was the kind of stuff, applying computers to looking at protein structures, structural biochemistry. I was
That's
at
pretty neat.
UBC for a while doing that. They have some really great researchers there.
Oh, that's fantastic. I would say I must say personally I understood about a whole 3 words of that myself, but that all the same, I commend you for it. That's definitely it sounds interesting. So
It was really cool. It's really exciting.
yeah, I'd love to hear it. So you said too that you've kind of continued with Orca work semi going forward. So into like once you finish your PhD in 2013, uh, what what kinds of things have you been doing?
Just kind of like supporting the archive in my current job. We are required to do volunteer time, so I'm
Oh,
really lucky.
cool.
This is my volunteer time, and just like supporting other researchers, uh, trying to get more people knowing about the archive, supporting people who want to use the archive. Uh,
Nice.
trying to make new versions of the web software. So we had a really cool version, but it was like Flash back in the first version. And then
Oh,
we
okay.
had like a more a Python version with JavaScript for the second version.
Hmm.
And right now it's just like the static website, but it's actually interesting for the static website. We're getting lots of machine learning researchers who are interested in studying the archive sounds. We're working with some people in Germany who have some papers. Orca Spot is one of their papers
Hmm.
published in on like one of the Nature offshoot journals, and they're
Gotcha.
doing a lot of work using deep learning with the original archive data,
That's
and
awesome.
trying to also like look at there's the sounds, but then they have the lab books as well. So trying to figure out ways that we can like digitize the lab books. So for every minute of audio that they've recorded, they're also writing in a lab book like
What's going
exactly
on?
what happened and
Yeah.
like where the whales were and what matrolines are nearby and what pods and clans are there and who is interacting. So there's just like think they have 30,000 lab book pages along with the
Oh,
20,000 hours of Orca calls. And that's just
insane.
until 2010. They're still continuously doing this as well. So just like lab books and lab books, just tons of data. So trying to like push it forwards, and it's like a slow process and just trying to find interested people. It's like hard to make money with this. So it's like hard for people to kind of continue on with it. So we're just trying to find interested young people who are passionate about this.
Yeah, I was well also too, I can only imagine if you have the audio recordings, that's one thing. You can really denote it by time, but as soon as you add a notebook into it with the play-by-play, so to speak, it's a lot harder to even connect the two, have them in the same realm enough to like read them at the same time. I feel like that takes a little bit of effort and proper concentration to be able to get in terms of like being able to make it somewhat continuous.
Yeah, exactly. The original archive, the Ruby on Rails Flash version, you could like link up the lab book page with the recording. And so you could say like the recording doesn't have like the times in it, it's only in the lab book pages. So you'd like
Hmm.
associate the lab book page with the recording, and then you could set the start time of the recording.
Yeah.
So even in the current like static text version, you can still pull out that information. But that was like a really manual, laborious process. I did some of it, and then Rachel Griffin helped as well, one of
Okay.
our research assistants. But it's a really laborious process to like link up the cassette tape with the lab books, but doing a little bit of that.
Oh, definitely worthwhile as well. That was one of the things when I was initially looking at Orca Lab and the rest of the organizations around me and any other orcaholic, or as I'll call them. Like the biggest thing is like, oh, like how can we help? What can we do? But I found that the biggest answer that they'll give is like, if you want to show up, you're going to do grunt work at the very least. Something like you're going to sit down, you're going to go through the information, you're going to have to be consistent or anything like that. But what I've also found too is the research assistants that help out are continuous. There are people that come back annually, sometimes, that I found as well. Is there any like, I'm curious to see how many people do you think are at Orca Lab at any given time? This is one thing I personally haven't been able to find.
It depends on the time of year. In
Hmm.
the winter, they almost always have at least a couple people. That used to always be Paul and Helena, but now they spend more of their winter in Alert Bay, and they'll find like Leah was one of the people that would come every winter and would stay there. And
Hmm.
then the orcas start coming kind of like July, August, and then September, August, September. They're like the most orcas, so they'll have more people, a lot more people there. When I was there, maybe like 10 or 15
Oh wow.
research assistants that are
Yep.
there during the summer, and some that are like really dedicated and come all the way from Japan.
Oh wow.
Her name's escaping me now, but they have one research assistant that would just come every year, and she was very knowledgeable about the calls. And then they'd have people who would just like come for a couple years and more or less like regular, and then people who would just come just for that summer. But they could
Mhm.
have a lot of people. Their like kitchen was like filled with people the few times that we were there in the summer. So they could have like 10 to 20 people depending on the time.
No, it's a special kind of area because I remember too. I don't think they have a, I don't think they have a proper station. Well, maybe it is at Craycroft Point as well, because there's the one in Hanson Island, and then there's another like a lab or observation area. I think is a better way to call it.
Yeah. It used to just be on the rocks, and now they have like a little shack there. So then they'll have a couple people that are staying out at Craycroft Point, and that has like hydrophones right in the water, and they have like a big high-powered camera there as well. And they're
Oh,
kind of
really?
like the ones who are just like a little more isolated, and they don't come back to the lab every day. They like more stay out there, but people really want to go out there. Like you hear some really great experiences with people, and usually they'll have like a couple people staying out there as well.
It's awesome. As that's also something too. I can only imagine once you're in this kind of location, you start to develop. You'd have to start to develop a bond with the whales as well. If you're in, like you said, like there's a little shed that's tied up on the bottom of the island. You're not going back every day. You're hanging out there a lot, and your sole job is to keep an eye out. It's got to be special, even just
It
to
really
wake
is.
up in the morning.
Yeah, it really is. And like with their knowledge and dedication that you really know each of the whales, and like that this whale is like 80 years old and those are her two sons that are hanging out with her. It's just like just amazing to like see that like history, and you just that's really you're just like a much different experience than going whale watching where it's like, oh, those are some whales. These are like they know exactly their whole family history of these whales who are right there. So it's a really special experience.
Oh yeah, well they're watching the story unfold with their eyes. They know all the characters. They know they know what the subtitles are to an extent, but things like that. That's one of the things about whale watching that I've always found interesting too. Is that here more than anywhere I've found like when you go out, they'll say, "Oh, we're going to see like we're seeing X pod right now, JKL or Northern Residents or Transients, whatever it might be," and I don't know how many people that are on the whale watches like fully conceptualize all of the work behind that one phrase. Hey, we're seeing J25. The amount of history to start with of the whale itself, but then the people that discern the like they could be seen, and then the one who denoted the name, and then to a point where a naturalist on a boat could look at a whale and be like, oh no, I know who that is.
Yes, exactly. Like your shirt and like how it shows like all the saddle patches
Precisely.
and all the whale and all the fins and the dorsal fins and how they can just tell from that, just like it's individuals. It's like they know each individual. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Have you ever, because I've seen some orcas come into Vancouver before. Like I have a friend that works at the sea bus, and every so often, like when I think it's like once every couple years, a whale will come through and like somebody will catch a video. But I'm not sure. I've never heard of them going like into the bays or across Victoria, or being spotted there at the least.
Like it's pretty far out. You have to take like a whale watching boat, but then you can see some southern residents. Like
Hmm.
I think maybe one time on the ferry coming from Vancouver, I saw a couple orcas reaching there. And then
Oh,
up in Powell River, I saw a couple, but it's pretty rare. But yeah, they don't come so far over to Victoria. It's
yeah.
a little further away.
Yeah, fair. Well, also too, now that I think about it, I didn't realize Victoria was literally directly across the water from Limekiln, or the west side of
Yeah,
Salmon
there you
Island.
go. Yes, yeah, totally.
So if they're going to be going along that side, then that would definitely make a little bit more sense.
Yep, at UVIC, you can see directly across, you can see the little dot of lime kiln right from the computer science building.
Oh, really?
Yep,
It's about one of the best views in the world, in my opinion. I
it's
love
pretty cool.
that whole area is it's like I said, it's proper magic, is the way to explain it.
Yep,
It's the
totally.
best way
That
to
was from
explain
the
it.
other side of the building. So we'd have to go to the other side of the computer science building to see that. And on our side, it was all the ravens talking. So we're using a lot of the same things to study their raven calls as well. So we're
Oh,
right
really?
in the middle of nature.
So, oh no, just ravens were just outside the window where that was.
Yeah, and we'd play
Okay.
weird music, and then they'd sometimes like I don't know if they're responding to what we're doing, but like as they make some sounds, or like maybe they're listening.
Yeah. I would say that, but I can only, from what I've known, birds have a pretty good sense of hearing at that rate. So I would imagine they pick up a little here or there.
Yep, yeah, yeah. Ravens have like a whole language as well, but it was more orcas that we're studying for sure.
Oh no, no doubt, no doubt. I gotta say too, I remember in terms of views, one of the recent ones that I've been doing is I'll go to Grouse Mountain to go snowboarding, but you can see out. And one of the things I've been trying to set up, and I haven't gotten it quite yet, and I haven't gotten a powerful enough camera, but I'm pretty sure you can see Victoria and San Juan Island. Like it's high enough that you were able to point it out. So I want to see if
Oh,
I can. I want to see if I can get that shot at some point. Um, so you
amazing.
said you were working in Vancouver, working with the chemistry, the computer science chemistry. What's the name for that again? I'm sorry.
Protein crystallography, structural
Protein
biochemistry.
protein crystallography, structural
Yeah.
biochemistry. Protein crystallography, structural biochemistry. I'm gonna get it.
It's a
I'm gonna
lot of
get
like
it.
3D structures of these big macromolecules that work in our bodies to do all that basically make us
Gotcha.
as organisms.
Fantastic. All right. So you're doing that in Victoria as well, or in Canada somewhere, or in British Columbia?
Yeah, I started at University of Alberta doing that, and then I moved out to UBC with Natalie Strunadka, who's in the biochemistry department, and she's a super amazing researcher. And then I uh, did a little bit trying to do a startup on my own in that field, and then moved to Leiden in the Netherlands to study
Oh,
that
really?
with Navraj Panu, and then we were developed some algorithms over there. So I was doing that. But then after I came back to Canada, I was just trying like internet startups. So it was like
Okay.
2005, 2006, just trying to make some kind of internet startup. But yeah, for many years, I was until like 2003, I was in that field making new
Gotcha.
computer algorithms and 3D visualizations of these proteins. So
Yeah. What were some of the startups that you were working on in 2000, like you said, 2003, 2005?
I had lovemygarden.net. That was my like own one. And that's like a kind of like to like you could plan out your garden and like blog about your garden. But
That's awesome.
and then we had another one, Pure Idol, and that was kind of
Mhm.
like YouTube meets like uh American Idol, and people could vote on your like if they liked your like performance.
Okay.
So just trying
Yeah.
and just trying anything to that would work. So
Those sound like pretty fun things to play around with, to say the least. So like planning out your garden,
yeah.
that's the if in order to do that on the web, there's definitely some intricate ways that you could set that up. So those are pretty solid ideas to try to run with at that time, I'd imagine.
Oh,
Try to run
didn't
with
make
at
any
least.
money, but it was fun. It was cool.
Yeah. And then you said you went to the Netherlands for a little bit. What were you doing there again?
That was also the protein
The protein.
crystallography, the
Okay.
structural
Gotcha.
biochemistry. And yeah, the Netherlands is so lovely. And we're in a really cool Leiden, a really ancient university town. And just like making algorithms to like study proteins and um,
That's
to like
awesome.
solve structures of proteins.
Yeah. I would say you've been in a couple decent or fantastic places of the world for this kind of work. So it must have been pretty neat, to say the least. Did
I'm
you
really lucky, yeah.
yeah. Did you grow up around British Columbia?
I grew up in the frozen north of Alberta, in the
Oh, very
outside of
nice.
Edmonton, Alberta, in a little tiny town. And the thing that saved me was science fair. So like that's how I got
Okay.
into protein crystallography. Was there was just very little uh, uh, enrichment, so I had to find my own thing. And then
Yeah.
I found proteins and somehow got connected to a really amazing lab at University of Alberta
Hmm.
that was doing some of the leading work in that. So then I just kind of fell into that field, and I was just so lucky to just like find something from the science fair that was just such a hot area, and just I was just really lucky to be in some amazing labs. And
So when were you doing the protein crystallography, like in the beginning with the science fair? Was that high school or was that university
yeah,
that
high
you
school.
recall?
So the grade
Really?
10 and grade 11 Canada-wide science fair, and making computer programs to study proteins. And actually, yeah, that's kind of what I'm switching back into. So like there's been all those new
Okay.
advances with like DeepMind and AlphaFold 2
Yeah.
and Google. They've just kind of solved some of those problems. So I'm going back into that. But yeah, that was like 1988 that I was like doing the stuff on the old Mac Plus and doing bioinformatics stuff. So I was just,
Wow.
it was really fun. I just had a lot of fun doing it, and then just like lucked into a really amazing lab at University of Alberta, Dr. Michael James's lab, and just had some really amazing people. So just kind of lucked out.
Well, lucked out. It sounds like there was a good amount of work behind it as well. So don't sell
Oh.
yourself short with that. That creating creating. No, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it.
Protein crystallography.
Protein crystallography. I am terrible.
Yeah, you try to
Creating
make crystals, so like like salt
crystals and
crystals,
protein.
or you're
Yeah.
trying to make crystals out of big proteins, and then you take the crystals and you shoot them with X-rays, and from that you can determine the structure of these huge proteins that are in your body.
I I cannot I like to say that I was doing orca research when I was in 10th grade, but what I was really doing was reading. So shooting X-rays into the salt crystals to or protein crystallography properly at that point in time, I don't sell yourself short with that. Definitely definitely you had something to do with your success overall. That is an integral part.
Thanks, I'm a nerd from way back. So
Definitely. So one of the things about the Pacific Northwest too that I've always found interesting is there's always little pockets. Let's just bring it back a little bit because you started in Alberta, came to BC for a little bit, did in the Netherlands for a little bit, and then are now in Victoria, if I'm correct.
yeah.
What are, let's say, your top three favorite places? But the places what I'm talking about here is like I'll think of something like a view. Like personally, I would say for me, it would be like the top of Grouse Mountain looking south, and then east of, or no, it's looking west of Limekiln at Victoria. Like that one, those two I want to say are like, I want to say my biggest, but I feel like you've been to a number of fantastic places. I wonder if you had any specific ones that you just, oh, I love these properly.
Well, definitely one would be like up north, like Sointula or Hansen Island up there. It's just so wild, and like even when I was at college, I got to go up there just randomly, and it just like feels so much like home. It's just like so wild, but then civilized as well. It's just really amazing up there. Um, Probably another one would be like um, uh, the Netherlands, but like, so I was in Leiden, and that's pretty close to the ocean, and there's like, it's really easy to bike there. So
Oh,
I'd like
really?
bike, yeah, because it's all completely flat, because it's all like floodplain. So that's like super,
Oh.
you can ride on those Dutch bikes where you're sitting up, and it's like a whole different experience. It's really amazing. And you can bike all the way to the ocean. So like Katwijk and Noordwijk, you can actually see the ocean right from there. And it's just a really lovely, like couple-hour bike trip. That would be another one. And then
Nice.
actually, I really loved it. I was like down in Silicon Valley for a while, and probably like the that point kind of like past the Golden Gate Bridge where you're kind of looking out to the west out there, and it
Hmm.
just really pristine. And there's like these tunnels through the mountain, and then you can kind of you come out and you're seeing like the ocean out there. So that would be another. Loved San Francisco. That's amazing, amazing place, and just like felt so great to be just like that. Really felt like home as well, because there's just like so many like people interested in knowledge and computers and science,
Hmm.
and yeah, I really love that as well.
It's about the best place for it, as far as I know.
It was,
Definitely.
yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
How long, when you would go down there, was that for, because I know you were talking about you worked with Google for a little bit when you were doing the machine learning, or you did part of your PhD with them, if I heard right.
yeah, I'd interned during the summer, so yeah, I
Gotcha.
probably spent 6 years down there total, but the first three were just during the summers
Hmm.
and living in Mountain View. And yeah, so like about 6 years down there. It's just such a amazing location, like
That's
lots of
awesome.
nature, but then lots of like cool technology going on as well. And
Oh
then
yeah.
after that, then I moved down there, and I was living in Mill Valley, so that's just like north of San Francisco. It's just
Okay.
so civilized and peaceful out there. It's just amazing.
That's lovely. I also saw recently, if I'm not wrong, Google is starting to try to create an AI that can listen for orca sounds on
Yeah.
hydrophones.
Yep.
Have you had anything to do or like in contact with them for when they started up that project?
Yeah, I was talking to the person who started that, and that's really interesting. Um, they're making web interfaces for that, and I actually got contacted. The way that I got in contact with them was through the Rainforest Connection. So they're a
Okay.
really cool, like nonprofit, where they take old cell phones and they put them in the trees in like Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, South America, and they're listening for the sounds of chainsaws. And they have machine learning that'll detect that sound, and then they can send an alert to the actual forest rangers to detect to find the illegal logging. So they have this whole like web-based platform, and they're working with the people at Google. There's
Okay.
this AI for social good program, and so
Hmm.
they're part of that. So they're they're really cool.
Yeah.
rcfx.org and the Rainforest Connection, and they're trying to like use the same kind of stuff that I did for my PhD, these collaborative interfaces, and they're developing that. So that might be like Orchive 4.0 might be on their platform.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic. That's also, well, one, I can only imagine repurposing cell phones for that to listen for it. So if
Yeah.
just I want to see if I can conceptualize this right. So are the cell phones always listening, or are they listening for, are they like turned on, so to speak, by the noise of the chainsaw? If you
They
know.
have like an old cell phone, and then they make this solar panel array around it,
Oh,
so it's like
okay. Yep.
listening for the sounds all the time, and it's
Gotcha.
sending the data back continuously. And then and you can actually listen to that on their website. Like they'll have different jungles, and they go up and they take climbing equipment and go to the top of these trees and install their cell phones up in the top of the trees, their
That's
little
all.
package. And
Hmm.
then that broadcasted back to their base back in San Francisco. And then they use machine learning to try to detect those chainsaw sounds. And when they have the chainsaw sound, then they alert the local forest rangers, and then the forest rangers um, can just go and say, hey, stop doing the illegal logging.
That's fantastic. That's a pretty innovative way to do it, especially too. I wouldn't have imagined old cell phones of all things, but it's probably one of the. There's a lot of technology built into them. Might as well utilize it while we can.
Yep, yep, totally.
No, that's
So,
huge. No, that's a riot. Also, too, I can only imagine like that. That has to be decent for research in some capacity. Like I can only imagine if there's birds going into this like specific trees, or they're able to hear. Otherwise, it's one of the coolest things about research that I think I found as well is like a lot of it is haphazard. Like you put something up for one reason, and then you realize, oh, this is useful for a whole bunch of stuff.
totally, totally. That's their latest thing that they're doing, just like they started like 2 years ago, was then they're detecting the chainsaws, but now they're trying to like detect all the different uh, organisms, like the I want to say monkeys, but they had a different word for it than that. So all the different kind of animals that they can detect from there.
That's awesome. There's a lot of different organizations, like we were talking about before, explore.org, and then this is the Rainforest Collective, you said?
Yep.
Yeah, the Rainforest Collective. A lot of them where like you can listen into different parts of the world. That seems to be a running theme lately. Also, did you see? I think there was a commercial for it on YouTube, or there was an ad for it on YouTube at one point that I saw. It was like they put speakers in a bunch of places in Iceland, maybe, and you could like record something, like you would record something on your phone, and they would play it through the speaker at some point. Like you put it in a queue,
Cool.
but if you wanted to like let out some steam, you scream into there, and like the whole the whole ad was just these speakers in very weird places, like very open places, just with people doing that. But I would like it's like the exact opposite almost.
That's so interesting with like the art installations. Yeah, like we're doing some stuff in George's lab with that as well, and how that kind of connection between like science and art for like getting people to listen to more. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. One of the things that also that I've been thinking about at the very least is like I have a J, so for those of you who can't see, I have a J Pod sweatshirt on right now, and anybody can practically
Oh,
go on to learn the dorsal fins as far as I'm understanding. They're documented heavily. You'll be able to find a numerous amount of pictures for any at least southern and northern resident that you'd want to. But for the audio recording, so to be able to listen and hear, let's say specifically the northern residents, if you were to try to explain to somebody how they could go through the Orchive and let's say learn the calls of A5 or learn the calls of the A5 match line, how would one go about that?
Um, there's a couple ways. I'll just like advertise mine first. So like as part of my PhD in the Orchive, we made like an iPad app that you could like learn the calls. So like it would like show the different calls and you'd like select them and it would like help teach you what the different calls were. So
Hmm.
it'd like show you the different um, kinds of call. And then also they're a little bit different in each matrix line. So the N4 call will be a little bit different in each matrix line and each pod. So
Gotcha.
then that little iPad app would show you. I'd say like the real way is to use like well, first of all, I'll just say like Helena has a call catalog that's really amazing and you can download it on the Orchive.
Oh,
And
really?
she
Okay.
went through really meticulously and found really good examples of loud calls and the call the calls I should say like clear calls, and that means
Hmm.
that they're recorded close to the hydrophone because the calls are all about the same loudness, but some
Yeah.
are very far away. So she's gone through really laboriously and found the different matrix lines. So she's labeled the matrix line and she labeled the call type as well. So that's when she wants to teach the people up at Orca Lab, she'll use that call catalog.
Okay.
And we used to have a really cool like web interface, but right now it's just like audio files. And
Hmm.
then that's probably like when they go to OrcaLab, that's how they'd be like teaching the people to recognize the different calls. And then
Gotcha.
John Ford as well, like we should just like really respect him because he
Oh, of
he
course.
went through and like has that whole like he has his that whole like long document with like all the calls, and he like would make the spectrogram on like some old like physical machine, and then he'd like use like an Apple II and a digitizing light pen to like actually digitize where the different sections of the calls were. And so that's
Really?
like it's an amazing that's like linked in my PhD thesis, and there's a great like long PDF, and it has like all the calls from all the
Hmm.
different major lines and all the differences between all the calls. It's just like uh, an amazing amount of work and just like a really great resource. And so that would be the most hardcore. That doesn't contain the audio though, so uh, that would be like the real source of truth for the northern resident killer whales.
Gotcha. Well, no, what that would be is the subtitles. You get to learn. You get to learn to
Yeah,
read the language. A little cheating there. You get to read the proper the spectrograms.
yep,
That
yep,
would
totally.
make all the sense in the world. Yeah, I'll have to do that going forward, because one of the, like, I know personally I want to try to at least get my favorite matcher lines down by sight, but also by sound would be definitely something special. I know the hydrophones are set up literally all up and down this coast at the least, so uh, and you know when they're coming as well. So
Yep,
listening into that would be nice.
yeah, yeah, totally. And to get more people to like really get into that and learn that, that would be really amazing. Like
Well,
just need more people interested in it. I made like a really simple Android app a long time ago, but like to get more people who want to do that, that'd be really super cool.
well, this is an idea actually. One thing that we could do, like I said, I'm doing this podcast and a couple other things just for proper fun, but um, if you'd like, or if you'd be down, I would love to one point in time sit down and go through the archive, being like, okay, let's learn this match line, and then
Cool,
properly go
cool.
through. We can screen share and record the screen so that people can follow along and do that for whatever one they decide. Because as much as we can explain it here, and I'll even put a little explanation in the description of whatever that is again, being able to properly sit down as almost a tutorial for people. I feel like that could be of use. I feel like people might actually get a little bit out of it.
Wow, cool. Sounds great. I have like all the call catalog. Helena gave us the audio, and I have spectrograms, pictures of all of them as well. That's we can download them all and then just go through those. For a lot of them, it's pretty clear. Like the N3 call, you can really tell the difference between the different matcher lines. And then some calls, like the ping, is really specific to like the G. So once you hear that one, then you really know that that's like the G clan that you're hearing.
How much? So you have a little bit of a music back, or you have a music background as well. How much do you think the music background helped in discerning the differences of the call? Like you said, the end call is the same, but it's different across match lines. Like having the ear for that. Do you think music uh helped when you were beginning it, when you were starting to look at the differences?
I think so. Like, it's hard to know because it's just like such a part. Music has just been such a part of me for my whole life. But
Hmm.
I think maybe like just like that I'm so into music maybe would help. Maybe help to understand that. Um, the orcas are making like things that are much more complicated than anything we can understand. Like it's when you listen to bird songs as well. Like our
Hmm.
ears have trouble figuring it out. But yeah, there's a lot of musicians who are interested in orca calls as well. So there's probably some overlap for sure there.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things with, like you said, the things that you can't necessarily hear as well that would happen. One, that's the reason that we'll do the spectrograms, but then as well, there's also like one thing that I've always found interesting is, I forget where I saw this, but if residents and transients show up at the same place, it's dead silent in the water. There's, from what I understand, there's nothing, and then they go separate ways. Like they won't cross paths, and so there's another part of me that's like, while we might not hear anything, there's something going on
Yeah, yeah,
that we might not understand. So, to anybody that's listening, that's actually looking to jump in, there is an exuberant amount of work to be done still, that people are going to be interested in, going to need. It's going to help massively with conservation as well.
yeah. It just
So,
like for the people listening, like the residents, transients, and offshores, they're like genetically totally compatible, but they don't interact at all. and it's kind of like the residents are like, they're like almost the vegetarians. They're the ones that only eat the fish. Like, I guess it's not vegetarian because they're still eating a fish, but they're not the ones that eat all the mammals. And so, yeah, like everything gets quiet when the transient orcas come by, because they're going to be looking to eat some kind of mammal. And the residents are like different. They're the ones that are very much more vocal, and they're just eating the fish, and much less violent, I'd say. So they're kind of like the pacifists. It's really interesting, like how you can have these like two populations that are totally genetically compatible, but then they just don't interact at all. And they figure like that's been happening for like 500,000 years,
Oh
that
yeah.
those two populations are separate. So it's so interesting.
Oh yeah. Well, and then like the thing about orcas too that I found is like that's strong, one, social cohesion, but then also two, it's social dynamics within a species, which is its own
Yeah.
special like brand of thought, is what I'll call it. Because not only like we see that here as much as we do, but then there's other places around the world where orcas are that like people are just now in the past couple, I'll call it decade or so, really starting to pay attention and research, try to get information on. And I can only imagine as you branch out over the world, like how much that, what the social effects are with cohesion
That
versus.
totally, that's one of the things that Helen is the most interested in, is the social dynamics. And they have like just like really intricate social dynamics and social cohesion. Like the whales will stay with their mom their whole lives until one daughter has enough babies that she'll kind of start going off on her own and have her own matriline. So like matriline is like the mom's line of whales that are with her. And yeah, it's just like the social dynamics are just so amazing. And then the matrilines will come together. Some will hang out more than others. And then you'll have times when they all get together and have their huge parties. And you have some recordings of that are just like the things that you hear on some recordings are just totally wild. And the sounds are just like out of this world, and it'll just blow your mind. And there's like just a very few recordings with those, but like what is happening there and what kind of social things are happening. And they use that to like try to like make sure there's not too much interbreeding. So like the breeding will only happen when those two really different matrilines come together, like, or different pods or different clans even come together to like have babies. And maybe the sounds is part of how they're like determining who to have babies with. So that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I was talking with Andrew Schreitzer. I don't know if I was talking with him or it was at one of his talks. He mentioned that like if, because like you said, they'll end up breeding when they do get into the larger groups or otherwise. He said like the whales are attracted to other whales with foreign accents to an
There you
extent.
go. Yes, there you go. Yes, yeah, yeah,
Like that
exactly.
was about the best way that I think I've heard it. I'm like, oh, I can get behind that. Like I understand where you're coming from there.
Yep, yep, totally.
Which is fantastic. No, and also too, this the like most fun part of it is because the more that you learn about any individual whale, the more that you learn about the intricacies of everything that we understand in terms of audio, visual, or otherwise. It's like the more a part of it you feel to an extent, just like we get to sit down and like bask in this amazing, one, creature, but then two, like the dynamic at play, but then another very big part of that is just, it's like I said, being a part of it in some capacity, which is
Yeah,
special. So
yeah.
we're getting closer to the end, but one thing, because this is going to be broadcast in a bunch of different places, if you had to give advice or do a call to action to any young computer scientists or any person out there who wants to get into, I'll call it orca research in whatever way, or even just maybe even protein crystallography. Got it. Yeah. um,
You
what
got it.
would?
Amazing.
Thank you. What would that be?
We really need young people who are excited and who want to like study. Like, there's so many areas that we need people in, like One is just like people who will like help us do the grunt work to like analyze this huge archive. Like I've done a little bit. We had like I think 16 scientists that helped us. There's just so much audio to analyze. So like just like if you like listening to orcas, you just like help us like figure out where the different kinds of calls are and learn those different match lines. That's really important. Machine learning as well, for like machine learning scientists, this is like an amazing archive that's a huge 20,000 hours, 14 terabytes of audio that's just like really ripe for study. And there's like a few people that are studying it, and there's like some like the Elmar North's lab in Germany. We're just like coming up with a new paper there. There's like a lot of new techniques in machine learning that you could apply to that. And then also like different ways to like look at the audio of the whales. So like right now we're using things that audio algorithms we use for music mostly, but then like try to take those and like adapt them to the whales and to the whales the way that they hear. So there's just like so much to do, even with just the archive. And then there's more and more, like there's like the Oceans Network Canada, and they're recording audio all the time as well. So George Zanatakis, he's been
Mhm.
looking for students interested in this, and it's really hard to find students who are interested in studying orca sound. So yeah, if you're interested, there's like labs that want students who are like passionate about orcas. So it's just a huge, huge area. Also for protein crystallography, that's like
Definitely.
uh, there's been huge advances just in December with AlphaFold 2. So I'm trying to start up a little startup, trying to analyze that. And there's just so much, it's such a revolution that's just happening now, where we're like using like the advanced machine learning techniques to study audio. And you can check out folding.ai. That's my new tiny startup. And it's a really exciting time for
There you go.
collaboration as well. So like kind of like machine learning, artificial intelligence, they've just been like taking a lot of data and just putting it all together without being really careful with it. But what the next thing will be is intelligence augmentation. And that's like bringing the computers and multiple people together to kind of collaborate together. So yeah, it's just really lots of cool things going on. So, and
Yeah,
then
that would do it.
there's a whole language. The orcas definitely have some kind of language. So like cracking that language, that's going to be huge. They have words and they put them together in sentences. So like we don't understand what's happening. Like the N7 and 8 N8 calls are associated with each other, and they know like N3 is associated with them. They're kind of more in a sleep state, but like looking at their language is, it's going to be huge. Like the person to figure that out, it's going to be really huge, but we're probably a long ways away from it. It's a huge problem as well.
Well, that's the thing too about right now. You started doing protein crystallography when you were in 10th grade. If there's a 10th grader out there now who wants to do this for the next X
Yes,
amount of years, well, you never know what's going to happen as time goes forward. Having that little bit under your belt might be able to put you ahead further than you could imagine.
amazing. Exactly.
We love to hear it. We love to hear it. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. We're just hitting up on an hour, so we'll wrap it up for right now. I cannot thank you enough for one, the work that you've put forward. It is truly fantastic. Everything that I've looked at, I am continually in awe. And I'm excited to go dive into the archive a little bit more. And maybe there will be a time in the future where you and I can sit down and see if we can't show everybody else how, or show myself and a couple other people how to find and learn. I'll call it match line sounds or different calls
Amazing.
from match lines and otherwise. Before we head out, do you want to plug any? Well, you just dropped your startup, but you want to plug any your companies you're working for or ways to contact you if you'd like?
Yep. So like check out the archive, archive.cs.uvic.ca. So that's like the original archive site. And yeah, like check out my startup, folding.ai, and just
Cool.
trying to do some cool stuff.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much once again, and have a good one, everybody. Water pump. Bottom.